Uma, I would love to know how you would design a day that is geared towards fantastic mental health, clarity, energy, from a food and a lifestyle perspective, using all your knowledge and what you've put in your two books.
Thanks, Ruby. I think that's a great question. Starting off, we're in such a beautiful space that I think it makes me think when we get up in the morning, one of the things to do is really to spend at least 10 minutes outdoors if you can,
Okay.
or build it into your day. Firstly, the sunlight reaching our eyes is so important to help our circadian rhythm. I was just sharing with you my jet lag, and and it's certainly something that helps our circadian rhythm. So that if you can build it into some part of your day, and none of this is, I'm never an all-in-one person. So if you can build these things in, these I think are habits that have helped me.
Yeah.
I'm most certainly not perfect, but these are the guidances I give my friends and family and my clients. Another thing when we get up is drinking a glass of water, because
Okay.
our body is dehydrated.
Right.
Irrespective of how well hydrated we were the day before, just our body's naturally dehydrated. Drinking a glass of cool water is always great. I might add a piece of lemon in it. I might have it slightly warm sometimes, depending on the weather. And I think before, I really had to work hard to not go to my laptop or go to my phone. I've had to work hard to not do that.
I just want to focus on the lemon water and the warm lemon water, because that's definitely something that I've heard from my parents. But this, you specifically talked about the lemon, and I'm assuming it might be to do with the acidity and the digestive system.
Acidity, digestive system. Some people do things like have a shot of apple cider vinegar. And people talk about this in different scientific ways, but I really learned it from my grandmother. To just always have lemon in warm. If it's freezing cold in New York and Boston, I'm having it warmer. And people also talk about having enough electrolytes.
Okay.
And that's a lot of the conversation going on recently. So once in a I do get the little electrolyte packets for working out and stuff. But also just a sprinkle of Himalayan salt can sometimes help just to build your electrolytes back in through your salt. And we're not saying an excessive amount of salt, we're just saying a sprinkle. But all of those, for example, with lemon, the lemon rind has, and with citrus, lemon rind is rich in antioxidants.
Okay, yeah.
So even, eating a little bit of that or taking a bite of that is good. But that's just one habit. And before reaching out to my phone or my laptop, which are immediate distractions, I try my best to, I've meditated since I was a child. So even if I can get in 10 to 15 minutes in the morning, sometimes it's just a mindfulness practice, sometimes it's a form of meditation, but a way that just kind of clears my mind for the day. Doesn't always work. Sometimes I'm too busy. But then I try to do it at another point in the day. Okay. And sometimes I do what I call both exercise snacks and like mindfulness snacks. And what I mean by that is I don't always have a full hour at a certain point, but I do a component of it, and I do it a few times, either in the day or during the week. We spoke earlier about being intuitive, and intuitive eating is something I write about in Calm Your Mind with Food, because it's something I've practiced only because I wake up hungry on some days and sometimes I don't. So I lean into that.
Yeah.
And rather than have a hard and fast fixed rule for myself, and also because I travel a lot, if I get up hungry, I'll have a nice breakfast, and if I don't, I'll have it later.
Okay, so from what I'm hearing is you've got to build in flexibility into your routine. You can't be as rigid as every day I'm going to have my overnight oats with protein, or I'm going to have my omelette, or I'm going to have my leftovers at a specific amount of time in the morning. You've got to be intuitive to how you're feeling in that moment.
I think that if you're using intuitive eating, because, so you're right about me. You described sort of how I lead with my day. But with some people, they find that the structure of a schedule works. And if they don't have that, all hell breaks loose, and they can't manage, and they get thrown up. So if it works for you, I've been thinking to myself, how do I describe it the best? And one phrase I've come up with is, you do you, Dr. Uma, which is, I'm going to help to guide you with the stuff you do, but tweak the foods, the method, build in mindfulness, build in outdoor time, build in those lifestyle factors that you may not be paying attention to or realize are important. And the reason is that I want to lean into what you're doing rather than be split the way that the media teaches us to be or has trained us to be, which is eat this, not that.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Or do this, don't do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where intuitive eating has worked for me. And some of my patients fast and they start eating at 11 and then they finish eating by 7, or they have different windows. But I think it's important to do what works for your body. And that's one of the principles I've talked about in nutritional psychiatry, which is really body intelligence. So
yeah. When you're having that first meal, this is great because this is sounding like my morning routine. So I feel like I'm sort of ticking all the boxes in my head right now. When you're eating that first meal, if you've chosen to eat in the morning, what are the sort of non-negotiables that you want to have on your plate or in your bowl to ensure it's going to be supporting mental health, calm, reducing anxiety, reducing and improving your brain health?
For me, my go-to choices are things that are satiating, things that are easy because I'm often on the go, and things that I can make ahead.
Okay.
But with enough protein, especially individuals who are vegetarian or plant-based, just building that protein becomes important.
Okay.
So for me, it's things that I can make ahead, like a basil seed or chia seed pudding.
Okay.
With a couple of ingredients, I make a few, and because because chia seeds are so high in fiber and protein, a small amount goes a long way.
Right.
So I don't need a massive jar, but I have a small one made, and then I add my berries or my nuts, whatever my toppings are, that can change it up a little bit for me. That to me is one of the easiest things to do. The other favorite is a recipe that I created for this book, my second book, which is a chickpea omelet. So you can make a chickpea scramble if you can't get it to sit like an omelet. But you can. But it's a great source of. It's a great way to add your vegetables in. It's a great way to add spices in. Because I don't know about you, but I grew up eating savory breakfasts. And the first time I made a Pop-Tart was when I moved to Boston to study. And all hell, I shouldn't say that again, but it's like you suddenly realize, what is this, And then it tastes good, and you sort of get hooked on these, on eating in a way that you really were never used to eating. So I really had to, back in the day when I first moved, had to reset because these are not the best choices. So having eaten savory breakfast, a chickpea omelet.
I grew up eating savory breakfast, and I remember the first time my mum let me have a Pop-Tart for breakfast. It's because I'd been watching Nickelodeon, which is this kids show, the channel. It just came over to the UK. We had cable TV. And they were talking about Pop-Tarts. I was like, what is this Pop-Tart? And they were raving about
excited.
it.
That's right.
Yeah, and then I can't remember where we got it from. I think it might have been from Costco that recently opened up in the UK this time. This is going back like 30 years now. And I remember getting Pop-Tarts and trying it for the first time, and that sugar hit was addictive. Even as a kid, it was like, this is amazing. Like, I want to have this every day.
Exactly. And then, on that note, I have to share with you that recently the Daily Mail exposed this conversation, let's just say, between individuals who are guiding the US food guidelines, who, with an abundance of, I don't know what to call it, shared that they feel ultra-processed foods don't lead to obesity.
Oh, wow.
And that the studies were biased.
Wow.
And I think back to my short run with Pop-Tarts, and I'm like, there's just something so wrong about all of this. But I went to dig deeper into it and find out more. This just came out about a week ago, within the past week. But I think this comes back to some of the issues in the US that I speak about all the time, which is that people are given Pop-Tarts or they see Pop-Tarts on television. That's a great example. Or kids see it. Yeah. And we are not, the ads, the advertising and the food marketing and the food companies are pushing the foods that are cheapest, that are the least healthy, and that people want to eat. But they want to eat it because they don't know or don't realize that healthy whole foods can be delicious. Yeah. And that's something you and I talk about all the time. So I just feel there's a little bit of the inverse going on right now.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I think I know the article that you're talking about, and there's clearly some sort of manipulation going on.
Yes.
I mean, I'm quite happy to just call it out.
Yes.
In terms of the breakfast attributes, so protein is really important. Chickpea omelet, I think, is a great idea because you're getting the fiber, and I'm assuming that's just like a normal egg omelet with like
Exactly.
chickpeas and stuff.
What I did is I added spinach in it.
Gotcha.
Recipes in the book, and you can add in any veggies. You can use your leftover veggies from dinner the night before.
Yeah.
But load it up because it's going to be more satiating. And then, say you make a big one and it ends up more like a scramble, which happens if you don't have the time to cook it gently and let it sit in the pan and stuff like that. That's fine. You can take half for lunch the next day, put it in the fridge. It's a good wholesome meal.
Okay, great. So you've got your decent breakfast. Your glucose level is nice and steady. You're not going to have any dips mid-morning. What else is going to be a part of that lifestyle?
Yes, so thanks for pointing that out, because the whole reason to have that satiating breakfast is exactly that. And then I'll have snacks that I carry or have in the fridge during the day. A little bit of cottage cheese if I don't have that for breakfast.
Okay.
Great source of certainly whole milk and certainly grass-fed. And then a little portion of that, because again, it's satiating, and I have a homemade granola that I call a brain food granola that again I developed for this book so that I can control how much of sweetness I have in it. And so I have that on hand as a snack if I don't have it for breakfast, and then I have nuts or berries on hand. So if I'm like you, working from home, Rupi, I'll have those things in the fridge. And then for lunch, I often like a really big hearty salad, because I can put anything I want in it. I can use any greens I have, chop up the vegetables I have, make my own little vinaigrette. It's so easy. And you can prep it ahead. You just don't add your dressing. And I can add, if I haven't had chickpeas for breakfast, I can add legumes, a piece of grilled tofu. And when I grill the tofu, I add spices to it so it's flavorful. And so, or I chop it up and I put it in the air fryer. And so that can be something added to the salad. And then in the evening, I'll go for, a meal that I try my best to eat earlier. It doesn't always work because sometimes I'm working late, traveling, that kind of stuff. But I'll do things like the cauliflower steak with, like a tikka masala. And I'll either air fry it or cook it on the pan. Lots and lots of extra veggies around that. And if I haven't had a salad for lunch, I'll have a salad on the side. So I'm trying to get in as many colors into my day of vegetables, different flavors from my spices, adding as many different greens and different types of vegetables or some berries into my day, because that's building up the biodiversity for my gut, for my brain. And it's a challenge because I'm thinking to myself when I go to the farmer's market or the supermarket, like how many different, I'm actually thinking to myself, how can I challenge myself with these different colors?
Yeah.
The other thing that I do to make my food prep easier is buy frozen when I need to.
Yeah.
Because if I don't have time to clean the whole head of cauliflower, frozen vegetables and berries in the US are flash frozen, so they're frozen at their peak. And so it's a great option. Keep them in my freezer in case I arrive and I haven't had a chance to do food shopping.
Gotcha.
So.
In terms of, you mentioned the brain food granola, which sounds delicious. What makes it brain friendly? What are the nutrients specifically in the ingredients that are supporting brain health?
Firstly, it's low sugar. So the fact that you're not adding a ton of table sugar, white cane sugar to it is just better for your brain, better for your gut, better for your overall health, better for your metabolism. But then the fiber from the nuts and seeds that I add and the unsweetened coconut flakes, all are just rich in antioxidants. And then the nuts and seeds have short chain omegas. So that's a way to build up your brain foods in a different way. And then I think, if I'm not mistaken, I have used some avocado oil, a very little bit, so that it has some additional fat to help it cook. And then my choice of way to sweeten is just a little bit of honey, because honey has other benefits. But adding those in, the way I think about brain food, it's almost like you, for want of a better word, you layer each meal. So as many of them as you can get into a meal, they are going to help your gut health. They're going to lower inflammation. They're rich in antioxidants. So they're going to hit some high points that are building up towards that healthier meal.
Yeah.
Because there's no perfect meal.
Yeah.
Because the perfect meal gets into the divisiveness of, should I eat this? Should I exclude meat entirely? Should I only eat red meat? And I think that kind of culture we tend to encourage in the US, and I don't agree with it.
Yeah.
I'm always calling out the fact that that's what confuses people about not being sure what to eat next or what the next superfood is, rather than how about just eating healthy whole foods in moderation and enjoying something that you like. So you may like steak, or someone else may like fish, someone else may eat tofu, but there's a way to do it that can make those brain healthy foods.
And you mentioned protein at the start of your sort of day of eating, let's say. How important is protein in general to disperse over your eating pattern, and how does that equate to mental well-being and brain health as well?
Just a quick one. If you're enjoying this kind of content, you will love our free newsletter called Seasonal Sundays. It goes into depth on a seasonal ingredient every Sunday, and we talk about the nutritional medicine benefits, the research, and the culinary uses of an ingredient every Sunday with recipes included. You can get access to the free newsletter in the link just down below.
So one of the things I did in Calm Your Mind with Food is I broke down macros, micros, and that sort of chapter so that it was more understandable for people, because we get confused with these terms. Protein is certainly important. For me, it's important to have a little bit at every meal, and if I can, in my snacks. It's hard for people to get a large amount of protein, but I think that's where we're building the right protein smoothie can help, because you have a clean protein powder, then you add in things that can up the protein amount. I think it's super important because it's satiating, it's helping build your muscle in the right way. It's helping many of the different brain functions, your neurotransmitters. So it's important to have those proteins in your meal.
Yeah.
So adding them in, but do it in a way that's comfortable. Like, I'm not saying have your steak at breakfast, but have a steak if that's what's your choice, either at lunch or dinner, and get in your protein. If it's tofu, make sure you're adding in nuts, seeds, and other sources of protein to build it up. Maybe throw in a protein smoothie somewhere in your day, because you might need that to get to a good protein level. And I think there are guidances on that, but I think it varies for each person too.
Yeah. And do you, are there specific plant-based sources that are good in sources of protein that you lean on?
Yes. So people are usually concerned about legumes and lentils, because of the sort of the carbohydrate that the carbohydrates that they bring, but they're rich in fiber. So it doesn't bounce off entirely, but it's a good option because you're still getting fiber and other nutrients with it. Tofu is a great source of protein. I always go for organic, non-GMO forms. Actual fresh edamame or frozen edamame is another great choice. Other sources of protein that people often overlook are things like cottage cheese. I'm talking about plain, not the Americanized version with tons of fruit and sugar and high fructose corn syrup. Really just plain, and then build your own flavors into it. Those are some go-tos. Certainly that and a clean protein powder. Always have that on hand.
What are the attributes of a good protein powder? This is something I'm getting asked about a lot, actually. I tend to steer clear of whey protein and dairy-based proteins because there's quite a mixture, although there are some good quality ones out there. But I find it harder to decipher exactly which one's going to be a decent one. And I sort of make my own protein smoothies using nuts and peanut butter. But there are powders that you like.
So one of two ways. So I think we're similar in that way. I might build it with nuts, seeds, and calculate the amount of protein I'm getting from that.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Another trick for either type that you do, whether you use a protein powder or not, is a recipe that I created for this book, which is from hemp seeds. What I found is because of my schedule, if I buy, and now there's a little bit of, certainly we're having some questions in the US about what we're putting in plain almond milk and stuff like that, and how processed it is.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, instead of throwing out stuff, which I hate to waste food because I'm not home, I just use a certain amount of hemp seeds and put those, either make the hemp milk and keep it in the fridge, small batches at a time, or I add the hemp seeds and water to my smoothie, and that makes it creamy.
Yeah.
So and plus you're getting your short chain omegas from there, and your
Yeah.
fiber. So this is a good way to do it. And then if I am using a protein powder, pea protein is an option. If depending on what you consume, a clean type of paleo protein is appropriate. When I say clean, just how they're sourcing it, who's making it, what are they adding. Another thing to pay attention to is what are they adding to sweeten it. Are they adding cane sugar, or are they adding a little bit of a small bit of, say, stevia, erythritol, a small amount of sweetener or monk fruit. These are ones that if you're using a small amount, I'm not asking you to eat it every day or put it in your tea and your coffee and everything. It does provide that, because most of the protein powders have, certainly the ones for the American palate, have to be sweet.
So, I've noticed that. Yeah,
exactly. They always have to be sweet. So it's more like how can I guide people around if you're looking for it and you see that a little amount is okay. I just don't want you putting the same sweetener in every single thing, because then you're having too much of it.
I really can tell the difference between the American palate and the UK palate. I mean, they are getting closer together, but we've tried some American protein powders, some American green drinks and supplement powders. They put a ton of sweeteners in it, and it's just sickly sweet.
It's very sweet.
I don't know how people tolerate the level of sweetness.
Well, it starts with how our food system is, which is that they add sugar to everything. It's not just Pop-Tarts. It's fast food, French fries. I think we spoke about this before. It's sugars and is in so much of what we eat that even in ways that it's, there are 262 other names now for sugar on food. There's a repository on the names for sugar used on food labels in the US. So I would say it's in everything. And that's why if I say frozen vegetables, look to see it's cauliflower. If there's a sauce or syrup or something else, that becomes a problem.
So the protein powder that I make myself, we've got it on the app. It's for free, actually, if folks want to download it. I put hemp seeds in because I think hemp seeds is one of those undercover protein sources that people don't realize.
That people don't realize, and it's creamy. When you add water, it becomes like, it really turns into milk.
People got to look out for the shelled hemp seeds, because you can get hemp seeds in its full form, which is a lot
And then you might,
harder.
sometimes you have to, and sometimes it depends on what you use, because you have to strain it.
Exactly.
If it's too, if there's some residue in it.
Residues, exactly, So I use shelled hemp seeds, raw cacao, because again, that's another really good protein source.
That's a great nutrient.
With those flavonols and great brain health benefits. And then I'll use like a neutral milk. It could be dairy milk, it could be water, and in certain cases peanut butter. And I use a sweetener. I use either a little bit of honey or a little bit of maple syrup.
And the way I use honey.
And I wanted to ask you about the sweeteners, actually, because there's a lot of debate, I think, over healthy sweeteners. Aside from using just the raw sugar in its appropriate amount, so a teaspoon here or whatever it might be, and cognizant of the fact that honey and brown sugar and white sugar pretty much have the same biological effects when you consume them. What are the sweeteners that you think are sort of on the okay green list versus the ones that you have concerns about that we should be avoiding if we do see it on a label?
So the ones that I'm most concerned about are the things that in the US are in diet sodas. And foods that are labeled as, I wouldn't say the newer functional foods, and I'll tell you why in a second, but those artificial sweeteners that are in our diet sodas and diet drinks of any kind, it could be a diet tea, for example, are usually problematic. The saccharin, the sucralose, a lot of those that are I want to say the older, slightly older sweeteners. The ones that I am okay with, but there are a few caveats. For example, stevia is natural, it's from a plant. It is still processed. It also, and I shared this in my first book called This Is Your Brain on Food, and here it's called the food-mood connection, that stevia unfortunately drives anxiety. So if you are using stevia in, say, your smoothie,
Yeah.
and you've read that it's natural, yes, it is. It is also processed. Unfortunately, studies have shown that it can worsen anxiety.
Wow.
So if you are an anxious person, maybe that's not the best sweetener for you.
Okay.
The other ones in moderation that I think I'm okay with, and when I say moderation, a tiny bit in, say, a smoothie or something that you're making, and not multiple times a day,
Yeah.
tiny bit of erythritol or tiny bit of monk fruit.
Okay.
I think that we have to give people some solutions. And a newer one is allulose. And so
Yeah.
far, the studies on allulose have been good.
Okay.
And I have to share with you, Rupi, that, I've become a little bit more flexible, in my opinion, on artificial sweeteners as I did more clinical work and research.
Okay.
I have to guide my patients in mental health around what their condition is. So with anxiety, I'm going to ask them to step back from stevia and use something else. But here's the thing I've mentioned a few times that, as Americans, is a very sweet palate.
Yeah.
So people, you're unlikely to be able to make a food, even at a restaurant, without, paying attention to what the dessert is or whatever it is, because that is what the population is used to. What I think health influencers and doctors and individuals like us can do is help guide people to using less of it, using it in moderation, and only when you need to.
Yeah.
So if you're a tea drinker and you have 6 cups of tea a day, like a lavender tea or whatever, I can't justify that you put any one of those sweeteners I mentioned every single time. I want you to practice, like I guide my patients towards extra dark natural chocolate, to having less of it.
Yeah.
But say you're making a smoothie and you're doing, you're not adding, say, almond butter or cashew butter, something like that, to sweeten it, or to make it creamy, a little bit is okay. But I just don't want you to rely on it at all, because that's when it can be disruptive to your gut, and build up in your body and that type of thing.
Absolutely. Everything has a dose.
Everything has a sort of dose. And my go-to is always a touch of honey.
Okay.
And I do mean a touch, because to your point, our food in the US is so sweetened that when people buy the products, eat the food, they can taste it. But if you train your palate to eat extra dark natural chocolate, to rely on things like berries for sweetness, and you will even find you use less and less honey over time, because your body gets used to it.
Yeah. Is there a particular type of honey that you prefer?
I like, it's more pricey, but I love Manuka honey.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But a wild honey, or a honey that you can get locally sourced or something like that, that's organic, is probably a good.
Yeah. We got really into honey here because we did a whole episode on honey and the proposed benefits of honey and the different flavors you can get of honey. It's a whole world.
There's a whole world of honey out there.
Yeah.
But I just go for something simple that I can, pop in the granola, or something that it's there because it has these other health benefits.
Sure, yeah.
And to me, although everything, it's a maple syrup, it all breaks down to sugar. Just what is the extra, that layer of benefit I can get from anything I add?
Totally. I wanted to talk about the broader picture of mental well-being, but I think I want to drill down into GABA as a neurotransmitter, because that's something that you've spent a bit more time talking about in your books, which is distinct from what people sort of naturally associate with the health, mental well-being and food conversation, serotonin and dopamine.
Yeah.
What is GABA, first off, and what role does that play in terms of the intersection between food and mental health?
Well, thanks for that question, because I think it's sort of a little bit ignored in terms of mental well-being, although a lot of the medications designed do target GABA. But since really we are food-first people and we try and help individuals find solutions through food, where I think GABA is relevant is it's very helpful to know that it's a neurotransmitter and it helps anxiety. It is related to the gut microbiome. So there are parts of the brain where GABA is more effective, like the amygdala, which is sort of a hotbed for anxiety. And making sure you have it in your diet from different sources is important.
Okay.
What I've started to do with the evolution of my books is talk to people about where you can get food sources of different neurotransmitters. And it turns out that with GABA, there's a population of microbes, Bifidobacterium adolescentis, that when there's anything that you're doing that is causing their production and their action to be impacted, they produce less GABA and you may experience more anxiety. So we're now understanding from the work of the microbiome, which I think is more and more powerful as we dive deep into it, that when you can connect different microbial species to actual impacts, like Lactobacillus reuteri also helps lower anxiety, it becomes more powerful as to where we can obtain these and how we can use these foods. But then you also get GABA in foods. You can get foods like peas, spinach, bitter orange, and eggplant.
We've got some peas here. So
You have
just
some
like
peas?
Regular frozen peas. This will.
There's GABA in peas.
Okay, great.
In
All right.
peas, and that's the reason we're going to talk about an eggplant recipe. So I
We've got
think
this
that
aubergine here. You call it eggplant. We call it aubergine.
Brinjal. It's all the same. The same one. And courgettes as well.
Okay.
Have some GABA. So there's a list of foods.
This is pretending to be a courgette.
That's
but it's
exactly.
actually a
That's our
cucumber,
our cucumber acting as a courgette today that we call zucchini. So it's just helpful to know that it's in these different food components. And again, it comes back to that. Just like we layer flavors, think about layering your brain foods. Every single thing we've talked about, adding multiple nutrients that are whole foods, that you can identify as a whole food versus a Pop-Tart, that actually adds to your brain benefits. And it turns out that eggplant has anti-anxiety benefits.
So in terms of, because most people look at an eggplant and be like, oh, this is mainly water, and and most people are scared about eggplants these days because it's part of the nightshade family.
Yes, some people don't eat them.
And some people don't eat them, and some people are sensitive, I guess. But it's pretty unassuming as a vegetable.
It is.
But now that I know that this has GABA in it, I mean, how much would you need to consume to have over a period of time to have a meaningful impact on
Right.
rheumatology?
I think that's where, so I'll tell you about the research behind it, but that's where we don't know the exact amount in terms of food doses.
Gotcha.
But how I think about it is the following. Eggplant is not a high-calorie food. We are going to layer it with some delicious spices and cook it in a healthy way. And if one of your side dishes is half an eggplant, and you are eating it a few times a week because you're building in those colors and textures of food and fruit and vegetables, that's a good idea because you are, again, layering your brain foods into your week. The study that looked at an anti-anxiety effect found that there is a component of, I guess it was the choline ester that they broke. They broke it down. They used eggplant. They turned it into a powder, and they found that in the study in humans, it helped lower blood pressure and it helped perceived stress.
Interesting.
And they were using, I think, they broke it down to a certain amount of acetylcholine from the choline esters, and they dosed people. It was a very it wasn't a large amount. I don't recall the exact amount off the top of my head, but they noticed that by taking that dose every day, it helped people. So when we think about food, what you want to be able to do is add these foods in several times a week. But if you're not eating eggplant that day, make sure there's some peas or some courgettes, or have an orange or something like that.
Because
it's just
orange
one way.
is another one of these foods that you mentioned, right?
Exactly. So, the other cool thing about orange that I have to tell you related to anxiety is one of my favorite foods is extra dark natural chocolate. And I know you'll use a lot of it here. But it turns out it's the highest source of plant-based heme, which we need.
Really? I didn't know that.
What am I saying? Iron.
Oh, iron. Yeah.
Plant-based iron. Because we usually get our iron from meat, which has the heme iron. But you need vitamin C for it to be converted. And so extra dark natural chocolate, I learned in culinary school, goes well with oranges, but I never knew there was a scientific mechanism behind it.
Yeah.
So I always say, have those pieces of extra dark chocolate, have a clementine, an orange, a mandarin, something like that, that helps along that interaction, because that way, 30% of the world, according to the World Health Organization, is iron deficient, especially women and children.
Really?
And that drives anxiety low. Low iron drives anxiety.
Yeah.
So, as well as other things, but since we're here to talk about mental health, so having that, as a little go-to becomes important to build up your iron sources, especially if, say, you don't consume red meats.
Sure.
And other meats,
Yeah,
so.
yeah. There's that saying in culinary school, what grows together goes together.
Yes.
And I wonder if there is like some wisdom behind what flavors well together actually is good for your health as well, like orange and chocolate. I mean, that's like one of my favorite
thought it was the
combos.
most delicious thing when we did these recipes.
Yeah.
And I didn't know until I dove deeper into the science that actually there's this mechanism that helps our bodies, So when you learn these little things, I just feel the more of them we can do in our week and our day, our ideal day is good.
Yeah. I always look to the example of Chinese five spice.
Yes.
As the best sort of healthful collection of spices together, because it's got clove, it's got cinnamon, it's just all these star anise, it's got all these incredibly high antioxidant levels of polyphenols, and it just goes so wonderfully well.
It does, and
with
you can
everything.
put it in so many things. It really does.
Yeah. I actually put that on my aubergine. I had aubergine last night. I didn't realize we were cooking with aubergine today, but I had aubergine last night, and I did like a 5-spice quartered. I did like a little cubes of aubergine, and then just stir fried that in a pan with some olive oil.
Delicious.
And the 5-spice with aubergine goes so really well. Yeah, because aubergine takes on a lot of flavor.
It takes on flavor. This is the huge advantage. It's kind of not with much flavor.
Yeah.
But it absorbs flavor so well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's incredible. I love it. And in terms of food creating better mental health, and when I say mental health, I'm really using mental health in a broad sense, because it's encompassing of everything from depression, OCD, low-grade anxiety, schizophrenia. What are the mechanisms behind how food can help with mental well-being?
So this is a slightly longer answer. In my first book, This Is Your Brain on Food, also the food-mood connection, I describe the major conditions in mental health and go through the mechanisms based on one very common thread, which is the gut-brain connection, but then the foods to lean into and the foods to step back from. And for example, in the chapter on anxiety in that book, we talk about stevia a lot, just to guide people in the studies. I think what's important to understand is that mental health is impacted by the food that we eat, and it's not a connection that we've made. And that's why nutritional lifestyle and metabolic psychiatry are bringing forward this concept, and I think can help more people, because we know that COVID really uncovered a mental health crisis that was always there. We know that anxiety has increased by 25% since COVID. And we know that the most common condition is anxiety. But here's the thing, in overall mental health, depression and anxiety tend to run together.
Yeah.
And the medications that target them often are similar. But food can also be an option, not in a clinical emergency, not in severe depression, psychosis, or mania, or an eating disorder. Food can always help, but of course you may need to go to the emergency room first, get an urgent appointment. But for everything else, if we're just at home, trying to feel better, food is a very powerful source. For conditions like OCD, there are different types of natural glutamates in food, like miso, which we would ordinarily suggest to someone.
Yeah.
Because miso is fermented. It's a great source of fermented food. It's great flavor. But if you have OCD, it can actually drive some of your symptoms. So even foods that are healthy, these are the little nuances we go through in the book, trying to help people with different mental health conditions. Bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, because of the benefits of the ketogenic diet on metabolism, they could be used in the shorter term there if someone is on high-powered medications that are causing weight gain.
Right.
Or they start off overweight. So, we cover all of these different components. It's important to understand the breadth of the mental health, which I appreciate you shining a light on.
Yeah.
And then in terms of anxiety, because it is so common, I just want people to think of the word calm because, when you're anxious, you don't want to hear the word anxiety. I get that. I totally get it. I've been there. So you want to think
really
about.
Good point. Yeah, I didn't realize that particular
you don't want to
the
hear
focus, calm.
exactly.
Yeah,
so you want to feel calm. And the next time I visit Europe, we're going to make the lavender Play-Doh recipe.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I'd love to do that
because you can't eat it, but it's just like your own homemade stress ball.
Yeah,
that you can play with. So.
And I guess going back to that, the 24 hours or the lifestyle element, maybe playing with some lavender Play-Doh would be a nice way to end your day.
Great way to end your day. Great way to go to sleep.
Great.
Because if you're having often people will complain about insomnia, but actually they have anxiety and they don't realize it.
Right.
Because anxiety is also a condition that is masked by other things.
Yeah.
And you start to help them improve their sleep, and suddenly they, or you're working with them to improve their anxiety, and their sleep improves, or vice versa. So sometimes you just have to figure out what the way in is.
Yeah.
But lavender Play-Doh is great. Then teas. The other thing we should have mentioned is just calming teas throughout the day. Green tea can definitely help focus. Lavender tea is not, we think of lavender and we think of a spa experience, but actually you can make it into a delicious tea.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we're going to have fun in the kitchen making one of your eggplant/aubergine recipes with tons of spices. And folks can watch us on YouTube. But yeah, phenomenal book. And congratulations again. This is going to be one of the books in my repertoire that I recommend for folks. For sure.
I appreciate that very much.
If you liked that episode, you will love the full library of Doctor's Kitchen podcast episodes, including this one I did with Dr. Robert Lustig, where we talk about sugar in all of its harmful forms and what you can do about it right now. You can check it out by clicking out on the link.